and welcome to Indie Business Radio for Monday, August 17th, 2009. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's show is sponsored by Essential Wholesale, aromatherapy, essential oils, and the largest selection of naturally derived base cosmetics in the world. Check them out at www.essentialwholesale.com or call 866-252-9639. Well, in today's economy, there is no surprise that more and more people are finding ways to take their talents, their gifts, their educational backgrounds, and their work experiences and turn them into a consulting business or work with other people, collaborate with other professionals to create consulting businesses where they can serve other people. And this is certainly nothing new, but I see a lot more of it nowadays with the economy being the way it is and with a lot of people discovering that there are ways to generate income outside of the traditional means. And today we're going to be talking in general about professional services and how to market them. Our guest today is Mike Schultz. He is the co-author of a new book called Professional Services Marketing: How the Best Firms Build Premier Brands, Thriving Lead Generation Engines, and Cultures of Business Development Success. Mike is the co-president of Wellesley Hills Group, where he works as a consultant and speaker in professional services marketing and business development. He publishes TheRainToday.com, leading source for insight, advice, and tools for growing a professional services business, as well as the Services Insider blog and podcast series. Welcome to Indie Business Radio, Mike.
Thanks so much for having me here, Donna Maria.
Mike, your book is very meaty. There is a lot of information in here. I encourage everyone to check out Mike Schultz on his Twitter page at twitter.com/Mike_Schultz, where you can get a lot of information about him, follow his Twitter stream, and also click through to his website and learn where you can get this book. We're going to be covering some of the highlights of the information that Mike shares in his book. But first of all, Mike, I'd like to ask you this. Tell me why you felt there was a need for a book like this in the market today.
Well, it's a great question, and the need for the book is because there's so much bad advice when it comes to marketing and growing a professional services firm, and specifically a consulting practice. And that's not because people out there are trying to give bad advice. It's because the business rearing that many consultants and many professors and many practitioners out there have had is not in the world of professional services. So whether you learned it on the street or whether you learned it at business school, the translation of what we've learned about marketing and selling and entrepreneurship in general, it doesn't always hold. And so because of the special dynamic of what it means to build a practice based on you or based on some kind of intangible, it needs a separate set of advice, and it has a separate set of ground rules, and there's a different path to grow it. And so thus we wrote the book.
And Mike, you just mentioned building a service or building a business based on you. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, and let's even just take it from the perspective of tactics. I have met a number of people who have worked on selling products. And whether it was selling it over the telephone, whether it was going to a conference and showing their wares, whether it was knocking on doors and meeting people, here's the product, here's why it's wonderful, even if they were more of a consultative salesperson saying, you know, tell me what it is that you need, of course not necessarily asking a question like that, understanding the hopes, fears, desires, and concerns of the other person, and then showing how that particular product could translate into solving those needs. They try to sell themselves, and they fumble, and they fall down, and they become afraid, and they start pitching much like a service. Here's why I'm unique, and here's why nobody is like me, and here's why I'm different. And it falls flat, and the emotions it falls flat from the perspective of the folks listening, and the emotions of the person saying, I can sell the product, but I have to talk about myself. I have to talk about why I can make a difference. After I sell myself and I actually close the deal, I have to show up the next day and actually do it. it just creates a whole different set of fears on the side of the person selling, and it also creates a whole different set of needs for how you actually do that selling and marketing.
Mike, do you think some of those fears are the result of people in business school and maybe even earlier than that not really being trained to market ourselves and sell ourselves?
Well, I think it's part about training, and I think it's more about how people start down the path of their business. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. So almost anyone can end up as a consultant or in a service business, but oftentimes it's someone who starts off as an accountant or as a lawyer or as a consultant at a consulting firm or services firm, and here's what they say to themselves in college. I don't necessarily know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do, and that's I don't want to ever have to be a salesperson. I don't want to do that fluffy, foofy marketing and advertising stuff, so I think I'm going to go take an accounting class. Mm-hmm. Or I think I'm going to go take some of those pre-law classes. And then they find themselves, as you mentioned, not necessarily about training, but it's about an omission of what it's actually like to be in this business, is that your lawyer training is about being a good lawyer.
Right.
Or your consultant training is about being a business strategist, and then you show up at some firm and some senior person says, all right, let's go, here's the project, let's get working on it. It's not until 10 or 12 or 15 or however many years later that most folks find that they let's say they want to make partner. And it's a similar kind of thing when you actually need to start your own business. But they go to make partner and they sit down with one of the senior people and they say, all right, I've been a great accountant here for years. I've worked really hard. What do I need to do to make partner? Do I have to work harder? No, you work plenty hard. You do a great job. Your dedication is unquestioned. Do I need to give more back to the firm in terms of training and mentoring people? No, I think we've got the whole system set up and you've already done your part. So what do I need to do? Well, you need to bring in $1.5 million. You need to do it 2 years in a row and you'll be a partner. And then they're just hit with this different change. And I think when it comes to adults and learning new things, I think adults can be great at learning new things, but they're great at what's called iterative learning, or learning to be better at something they're already good at. So, for example, if someone's good at building houses or good with their hands, and then they take a tiling class, and then they take a carpentry class, and then they take a drywall class, and they learn and learn and learn. But to do something brand new, which is what children are good at, or generative learning, they have trouble getting into something, they have trouble seeing their way through it, and they have trouble absorbing the dynamics of how it all works. So it's part about training, but it's part about the career path that leads someone to the day when they say, I'm hanging a shingle and I'm here. Now what?
Right. Good. Well, your book certainly does a really good job of delving into those issues and helping people understand how important it is to figure out how they're going to learn those kinds of skills that you talked about. And, Mike, one of the first things that I notice people really struggle with, in addition to what you just talked about, Mike, is, oh, my goodness, how on earth do I price my services? That seems to stop everybody cold in their tracks after they've gotten a business all mapped out. They know what they're going to do. They even know what the competition or other people doing what they're doing are doing, but they just go, oh, my goodness, I can't underprice, I can't overprice. What are your tips for pricing services correctly?
Well, this is a sticky question, and as you pointed out, a lot of people, they simply don't know what to do when it comes to their pricing. Now, from a big picture, if you're just talking about from a macro perspective, I'm going to use a word and I'm going to sound like your typical annoying consultant and say, it's about value. Now, of course, that sounds like a cliche, but indeed it's the case. And so what you need to do is to be able to understand the impact that you can make on someone else's business or someone else's life, and then translate that impact from you and to that other person, so the other person believes that you will actually do the things and help them achieve the things that you say you're going to do. From there, you can start to come up with, well, geez, I can save them $20,000 a month in their, whether it's business consulting in their phone bills by renegotiating, or I can change this person's life and make their own business success by being their coach. They can go from making $50,000 a year to $250,000 a year by me helping them. You can start to quantify the difference. Okay. Now, translating that actually into pricing is a toughie, because especially when people get started, they immediately get started. And some people are on the flip side of this because they've been in the business and they know what they've historically gotten. Let's say they've been at a consulting firm getting $5,000 a day. I mean, like one of the big consulting firms. Well, they at least know they can hop out and try to charge that. And then what happens is that, and I'll give you one story. One of the clients that I worked with was at one of these large consulting firms, and they were making about $5,000 a day when they were doing their day rate kind of work.
Okay.
And they hung their own shingle, and there were 4 of them that decided to leave this company and work together. And they actually had probably a couple of $100,000 of business each when they left the firm that they could continue on and start doing. And so they were making a couple $100,000 a year each the first year. And then that business sort of petered out, and they didn't have a lead generation engine to put in new leads. And they thought that they were Mr. Big, relationship strong, established, connected folks. And within 3 years or so, 3 of the people left the firm. 1 person was left standing, and he had made $7,000 in the last 12 months. So they lost the branding, and they lost the ability of the firm to help put conversations with potential buyers, to hook them up with conversations with potential buyers. On the flip side, so there's the problem of brand, and there's the problem of lead generation with these folks. They still have the same value that they brought.
About something you said at the very beginning, Mike. You talked about it's all about value, and then you talked about placing a dollar value on the cost savings, for example, that you can offer. Does it have to be dollar savings that value is translated into, or can it be something else? In other words, is it always possible to place a dollar value? And if it's not, what else can you base your pricing on?
I'm sure you would find someone who would make the argument that it's always possible to place a dollar value on something. But how do you place a dollar value on self-esteem? And how do you place a dollar value on, and this is some more personal things, relationship success? And how do you place a dollar value on making a career transition for someone who's actually leaving corporate America, making a lot of money, and wants to live their life as an interior designer? So how can you put a dollar value on helping them make $150,000 a year less a year?
So
but realizing their hopes and dreams and goals. So I think the answer to that is no. And I think that and to translate this back into some of the topics we actually discuss in the book, what you want to do is you want to resonate with the buyer, with their wants and their needs. And resonance can be broken down into 2 types. One of them is performance resonance, which you can call ROI, or the dollar value of doing a certain thing. And the other one is emotional resonance, which is fulfillment and career success and the need to affiliate with other kinds and types of people and to have those emotional needs fulfilled. So there's the ROI side and the emotional side.
Okay. And we have a question from Tywika in the chat room. Mike, she wants to know your suggestions for continuously showing your value to potential customers.
Oh, that's a great question. So, and you're probably going to get me a little fired up on this one because this is one of my favorite areas to talk about. So, big picture again, 2 things need to come together. One is you have to understand what that is, and then 2, you have to communicate it. So the first part, in terms of understanding what that is, what your value is you have to develop a value proposition. Now, I don't mean a value proposition in the sense of your elevator pitch or those few words that come together. I mean just a fundamental understanding of what you bring to the table. And what you bring to the table, from a value perspective, usually breaks down into three parts, and I'll just give the highlights of these things. One is that you have to resonate. So people have to understand, what it is, what am I going to get out of this? So it has to have that kind of performance and emotional resonance. Two, the other part is they have to differentiate, which is can I tell the special differences that you bring to the table versus the other options of getting this done? And the last part is you need to substantiate, which is I need to believe that you'll actually get it done. And so I guess I missed my calling as a preacher in the South, but it makes me feel like I want to say, you've got to resonate, and you've got to differentiate, and you've got to substantiate. But indeed, that is what you need to do. Now, let's take, from a foundation perspective, let's take one of those away. If you're not resonating, so let's say you are different, and you've differentiated, and people believe what you actually say, but they don't want it, then I don't want it, so I'm not going to buy it. I don't need it. Let's say your differentiation, let's say there's just thousands of people that do exactly what you do as well as you do it, and so then the question becomes, great, I can get this anywhere, I need it, I believe you can do it, what's your best price? Because if you don't give me a good price, I'll get it someplace else. Mm-hmm. And then the last part is substantiate. If someone says, I'll help you raise your revenue 20%, drop your cost 10%, your profit will shoot through the roof, and I'll have it done in 3 weeks with so there's the performance resonance, with my unique methodology that nobody else has ever used before, and it's from this research that's just mine, and I am the only person in the world that can bring this to the table, so you're differentiated. I want that. I think that you're the only player that actually is in the market that says you do it, but you know what? I don't believe you. And so I'm not going to buy it anyway because it's too risky.
Right.
And so those are the things that need to come together from a foundational perspective.
Good. You have to resonate, differentiate, and substantiate. That's a great summary, Mike. We're going to take our first break here on Indie Business Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk with author Mike Schultz about the competition. How do we look at the competition? How do we perceive? How do we handle? How do we respond? That's next, coming up on Indie Business Radio. Don't touch that mouse. We'll be right back.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're talking today with co-author of a new book. His name is Mike Schultz, and the book is called Professional Services Marketing: How the Best Firms Build Premier Brands, Thriving Lead Generation Engines, and Cultures of Business Success. And Mike, before we took our break, we were talking about making sure that you resonate, differentiate, and substantiate. I love that it rhymes, so we can all really remember that and take it to heart. So let's talk now, Mike, about how to perceive of our competitors. How, if competition is supposed to make us all better, then why is everyone so worried about it? And your book suggests some different ways to think about competitors. Tell us about that.
Well, sure. I mean, a lot of folks in business, and I remember I got a bad grade on my entrepreneurship class final, And that was because when I passed it into my professor at business school, he said, "This is pretty interesting. I can see how you make some good money. I can see that the plan could actually come together. However, I'm going to take off the grade because you can't show me how you would achieve market leadership, and you can't show me how it would be hard for competitors to come into the space and cut into your margins by seeing that you're making good money, and then you find yourself in a commodity business. So I'm going to drop your grade." Well, here's the thing, and I'm going to get a little bit academic on us for just a second. There are four major types of firms from a microeconomic perspective. Now, we're familiar with a lot of them. One of them is monopoly. Back in the day, the phone company, who could charge whatever they wanted because it was a necessity service and nobody else actually offered it, so there was no other place to go. Mm-hmm. We are familiar with that firm type number one. Firm type number 4 is commodity, or wheat. People buy wheat at exchange price for wheat, and there's never any difference in terms of what the price is. So what they're buying for orange juice on the markets today is what they're doing for orange juice. Mm-hmm. Another type of firm is oligopoly. That's the one we learn about in business school so much, that there's one or two firms in a market that's the market leader and the follower, your typical Coke versus Pepsi, your GM versus Ford versus Chrysler, and then there's like a third or fourth player and a bunch of other folks mixed in that always have lower profit. However, and so that's what we learn about market leadership and who's going to get market share. That just doesn't matter that much for service business. And if you think about it like restaurants. So if I said to you, I've been working in an Italian restaurant for 15 years, and I'm a chef, and I'm awesome, and I'm award-winning, and I'm going to start my own restaurant, high-end Italian cooking, because I've been so successful at it. But I see here in Boston, and that's where I am, in the North End, there's over 100 Italian restaurants. So there's so much competition. I think I'm going to go to northern Maine, up to potato country, where there's absolutely positively no Italian restaurants to be found for 100 miles. And because I'll have no competition, I'll corner the market, and I'll be really successful there. Okay. And you think, well, the reason why you go to the North End is because that's where all the customers are. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to be afraid to step into a crowded service market, because the reason why there are a lot of providers in the market is because there are a lot of buyers in the market actually buying services. So don't be afraid of a competitive market to jump into.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. And you mentioned 4 types of firms. You said monopolies, oligopolies, commodities, and I didn't catch the 4th one.
The 4th one is what we consultants, accountants, lawyers, independent providers of any type fall into, and that is called monopolistic competition. And if you want to read more about that, all you have to do is Google monopolistic competition in Wikipedia, and you'll see the different dynamics that are going on. So we are the 4th type of firm. And when I give speeches, and I have audiences of hundreds of people, and I say, who here took microeconomics? And 10 or 15% of the hands go shooting up. Mm-hmm. And I say, all right, tell me the 4 types of firms. Everyone remembers the other 3. There's monopoly, there's commodities, there's which is actually called perfect competition. There's oligopolies, and they all forget the one that they're actually in, which is monopolistic competition. Okay, good. And I know your book goes into a little bit more depth about those 4 types of firm, but I like your advice to not be fearful of competitive markets, because obviously it means there's people buying things there. Another thing you talk about a lot is branding, and of course we all hear, branding is thrown around all over the place these days, and not everybody defines it the same. When it comes to professional service marketing, Mike, how do you define it? Well, I think when it comes to professional services branding, or when it comes to any different type of branding, that a brand is an impression in the minds of a buyer, or in virtually anyone's mind. So if you have made an impression, or you hold a space in the mind of a buyer, then you have a brand. Now, a lot of people confuse the word brand with something like graphic design or company identity or corporate identity. And so I'll run into someone who's at a consulting firm, whether they're large or small, and I'll talk to them. I'll say, well, tell me a little bit about your brand. And they say, well, it's interesting that you asked because we just rebranded. And then they go to tell me about it, how they built a new website, they came up with a new tagline, they have four new bullet points that are the most important thing about their firm, and they changed their corporate colors from teal to hunter green or something like that. And I say, all right, well, if I lined up 100 buyers in your industry, how many of them would know who you are? And they say, geez, well, that's a problem because I would call us a best-kept secret. Maybe one or two of the buyers in our market would know us. And I said, well, you just rebranded. And they say, well, yeah, but we're still not well known. So they didn't change their brand. They changed their corporate identity. So what you want to think about, and this goes to Tyrika's question about continuing to communicate your value, you want to think about what I call the brand ramp. And this is how you can continue to communicate to the buyers that you are a player in the market and someone to inquire about when they have a need. So if you break down the brand ramp into its 4 parts, the first thing you want is recognition. You want people to be able to say, if you said, who's the best small business consultant in the area, you want someone to say, well, that's John Smith. And if you're John Smith, you're very happy. So you have what's called unaided awareness. They just recognize you as a player in the market. Or if they say, do you know who John Smith is? And they say, oh, yeah, he's a small business consultant. You have what's called aided awareness. Now, a lot of people say, well, what we need to do is get our name out there. And that's what we're talking about here, getting the name out there. However, that's just where it starts, not where it ends.
So is it recognition and unaided awareness, are they the same thing?
Well, recognition can be broken down into 2 parts, aided and unaided awareness.
Okay.
I can tell you who they are just by you asking me who plays in this market, or if I show you the name of the company, they can say, oh yeah, I know who they are. And I've seen them around.
Okay,
the next part of recognition, after recognition, is articulation, which is if I said, oh yeah, John Smith, do you know what he does? Oh yeah, I've heard of him, but what he does? Yeah, I have no idea. So you need to have the buyers in your market be able to say, oh, I know how they help companies like me solve problems like mine, and then they can describe that. So you need the buyers to be able to articulate what it is that you do and how you help them.
Okay.
The next part is where a lot of firms stop, which is they have a good message and they're known in the market, and then someone actually has a need. And they say, now, who is that company that I talked to 7 months ago, or I've seen I went to their event. Oh, it's just been so long, I can't remember them. So you have to have them memorize you or remember you at what I call the elusive time of need. And then the last part, which is the P, which is preference. You need to get them, if they know who you are, can articulate what it is that you do, they remember you at the elusive time of need, you have to somehow in your communications process have them be dying to inquire about your services when they actually have that need. So how do you develop preference for your brand over someone else's in the market?
Wow, okay, so we've got recognition or unaided awareness, being able to articulate who you are and what you do, being able to be remembered at the time of someone's need for what you do, and then finally a preference for your brand.
Right.
Okay.
Now, there are a lot of people that I know that get the R, A, and the M and not the P, and they do that by continuously calling, emailing, and writing letters to the buyers about their services, and they call and say, do you have a need, or do you want to buy something? And their answer is no. So when they actually, get 7 months later and they've been bombarded by this person's more blatant kind of not about the client sales pitch, when they actually have a need, they say, I don't want to talk to this guy. He's been annoying me for 7 months. Now that I actually have a need, I'm going to find someone I'd want to work with, not this guy who just presses and presses and presses.
So when we put those 4 things together, Mike, are you saying that when we put this brand ramp together, that what we end up with is pretty much the sum of what is needed to become number 4, which is the preference for that particular customer for the service that you provide. Is that what we go from, because you're talking about recognition. Okay, so the first thing you do is you get people to recognize you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want people to do. So in your particular industry, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here to kind of, I'm thinking about different industries that I know about. We want people to think about the auto industry or think about the legal services industry or whatever, and think about you when it comes to something that they need that you provide. So when you're talking about branding, that's key. I just want to make sure I understand this because I think these are 4 really important points, and I don't want to gloss over them. So, I mean, can you test that? Can you do some surveys, or I mean, what do you do to get that kind of awareness? Is it just a matter of being around for long enough, or do you do something different or spectacular?
Well, you don't have to do something different, and you don't have to do something spectacular, but you do have to do something.
Okay.
So I know there's an accounting firm in the Boston area that is one of the mid-size accounting firms. I think they have something like 60 or 70 different accountants. Absolutely positively no one knows who they are. So they've been around for a while, probably 50 or 60 years, and they are complete nobodies when it comes to the business scene in the Boston area, because they're still the old style. They answer the phone when it rings, when they get referrals from some people, but they maintain no presence in the market.
Okay.
So it's not that. So if you said, do you do something spectacular? Do you do something different? Some of the firms, and if you think about the communication practices, they're always trying to think about the most amazingly new, creative way to get out to the market. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you think about it, and this is a little bit simplistic, but in the end of the day, it's exactly what you need to do. Identify your buyers, and for a lot of service businesses, there aren't tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of buyers. There's hundreds or maybe a few thousand. Well, you can identify them if it's a few thousand, one by one. Then you just need to start communicating with them. You could do it from as simple as direct mail letters.
Okay, good. Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, I'm really glad we're really, I'm so glad you sort of broke that down, because the 4 things sound sort of, they sound just like I wanted to make sure we put some meat on them. I love what you said. First, you identify your buyers. This is how you build that recognition. You identify your buyers, and then you said you start communicating with them, and that's what you meant by you have to do something, right?
Well, sure, but you said you need to do something spectacular or completely different. I'm saying if you just do the hard work of identifying your buyers and start to communicate with them, you can get your recognition from, let's say you have 100 buyers total in the market, and none of them know who you are.
Right.
If you just sat around for a few years and did nothing, probably none of them would know who you are.
Okay.
However, if you just got their mailing addresses and once a quarter mailed them a letter of something that would be interesting to them, you go from 0% recognition. You can very quickly go from 0% just with the letters to 10 or 15 or 20 or 25%. And can you measure that? Yeah. You can survey those 100 people and say how many people have heard of John Smith. And
good advice, Mike. That's really great. So for everybody listening out there, if you're wondering why not as many people know about your services as you think should, then think about whether you've done this very simple thing that Mike just talked about, identifying your businesses, your buyers, and just taking the simple step of finding ways to communicate with them. And speaking of that, we're going to be talking about that in our next segment when we come back, talking with Mike Schultz, the author of Professional Services Marketing. This is Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning their new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're talking with Mike Schultz, the co-author of Professional Services Marketing. And before we took our break, we were talking about communicating with customers, how to get the word out about your business. And Mike, in your book, you describe that as a variety of different outbound communications tools. So let's talk about those and how small business owners on a tight budget can use outbound communications to make those communications that you talked about being so important with their buyers. Let's talk about direct mail first.
Sure. So I think a lot of people, when they get into a service business, don't think that much about direct mail. One, email's cheaper. Two, they can pick up the phone and call folks. Three, they can use social media to communicate out to the market. They can come up with all sorts of different excuses not to use it. And for most professional services providers, their market, their targets, the decision makers, there aren't a zillion of them. So again, let's say there's 500 of them, and you're an independent provider and you're thinking about ways to save money. We all have enough money for a few reams of paper. We all have enough money for the printer at the house. We can usually come up with 44 cents for a stamp, and all you have to do is go through the time of writing the letter, having it be something that's going to be worthwhile, and using good direct marketing tactics, and then sending that out. If you do that regularly, you can generate a couple of different things. One of them is responses. People actually calling you for your services, and oftentimes just calling to respond to whatever offer that you made in the letter. But two, you'll be building up your brand while you're actually doing lead generation for your services.
Good. Okay. Well, you know, a lot of small business owners they do think maybe about direct mail, but I got to tell you, do your statistics and the studies and work that you've done show that professionals actually open a lot of that mail, which could be bound up with a bunch of other things that some people would consider junk mail?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I really couldn't care less about any statistics about how many people open it versus not open it. What I care about is response and in leads. So one of the things that people talk about, say, oh, you're going to send out so many pieces of direct mail, and virtually no one will actually look at it or even respond to it. I don't care. Let's say my service is $10,000, or working with someone over the course of a year is even $10,000. And I send out 2,000 letters, and I only get people often say that, you know, good direct mail response is 1% or 2%. Mm-hmm. Let's say that it's 0.5%, and I get out of 2,000, 1% would be 20 people responding. Let's say I only get 10 people responding, and I can only convert 1 or 2 of them into clients. Let's say I can convert 2 of them, or not 0.5%, but 0.05% become clients. Then I have spent probably $500 to develop $20,000. Why would I care about the 990 or 80 or 70 something people, actually the 1,900 and something people that don't open it or don't respond? I only care about the people that do respond. And so if you couple, by the way, direct mail by itself and any marketing tactic by itself, you have to have a marketing mix. That's why they call it a marketing mix. I've seen campaigns that I've worked on where we sent out really expensive, big, what they call bulky mail to get people to respond with extremely customized, high-end things. And if it wasn't coupled with a telephone call, the response was greatly diminished. But the mail plus the telephone call got plenty of leads.
Okay. That's great, that marketing mix. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Mike, let's talk for a second about email marketing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just talk for a second about email. So one of them is you can sit at your email, and you can open up a new email and send it to someone, and they might just read it. Now, people think about email marketing oftentimes as bulk mail, but you can think about it more as direct communication tactic. So a lot of people think about marketing as about advertising and PR and getting your message out in bulk. But again, if you're only targeting 100 or 200 or 300 people that you really want to develop relationships with, you can send them actual emails based on things that you find out about them and start to develop conversations and relationships.
And
now, if you extrapolate that to email marketing, that could be developing a list of people that opt in to read about things that you write about and or otherwise follow your company, and that's where you can get a lot of different benefits from email. And there's one other type, and that is actually renting email lists of established providers. Now, I'm not saying the cheesy way of buying lists that people compile, but you can rent Inc. magazine's email list if you want to talk to entrepreneurs and make them some kind of offer. So there's all different ways to use email, and if you use it right, it can work pretty well.
We have a question from Jennifer, a listener in the chat room. She wants to know a little bit about drip campaigns as opposed to random mailings about your products or services. Can you talk a little bit about what drip campaigns are and how they might fit in?
Sure, and it's exactly as the word describes, drip, drip, drip. And that is a great way to use direct mail and email and telephone calls and virtually anything else. And that goes to the point about the brand ramp. If I just say, you know what, it's October, and it's been a long time since I sent out a direct mail or an email, I think I'm going to do one. Or I have this new service, I think I'm going to do one. If you do that, you don't get that, the first part of the ramp down, that if you don't touch them enough, they won't recognize you. If you don't touch them enough with the right message and drip on them correctly with a coordinated message, they won't know what you do. And if you don't touch them enough, which is where the drip really comes in, then they won't remember you when they actually have a need. So I'm a big fan of ongoing communications tactics, of which drip campaigns are perfect.
Okay, so it just has to be regular and somewhat predictable?
It doesn't necessarily have to be predictable, but it has to be often enough that people don't forget that you exist.
So we shouldn't get hung up then on, the first Monday of every month or every other Wednesday. As long as it's regular, as you said, then we can kind of relax about which days of the week it turns out to be?
Yeah, you can think about it as more binary. Start, stop. If you touch people often enough, as long as you don't necessarily stop, it doesn't matter if it's the first Monday or the second Tuesday or every other week or every 3 weeks. But there have been major studies in big advertising world. There was an insurance provider, a multi-billion-dollar insurance provider in Great Britain that advertised a lot, and they decided to save money, and because of a strategy, they decided to, what they called, go dark for 6 months. And their marketplace data in terms of who knew them or who would consider them for purchase dropped way down when they went dark. So think about it as just don't go dark.
Right. Okay, don't go dark. That's a good way to look at it. Let's talk for a second about social networking.
Sure.
Now, there's a whole lot of different things that fit into this mix. So what do you think about that? A lot of people think it's a waste of time. What does your research show?
Again, let's think a little bit about what social networking is. Well, first of all, there's that second part of the word, which is called networking. And so what is networking? Well, the reason why you actually want to network and what happens for the business people who are in professional services that actually develop strong practices is they have relationships. That's not to say that relationships are the be-all, end-all, but all you're doing is developing relationships. Now, if you think about it, before there were interconnected computers, we developed relationships by meeting with people and going to places where other people were and talking to them on the telephone. Now, you have the computer at your desk. It simply provides another way to do two things. One, it's engage new conversations and engage new relationships. So things like Twitter are great for that because people can start to follow you, and perhaps they'll send you a question, or you can follow someone else, and you can send them a question. Next thing you know, you're communicating by email, and next thing you know, you're talking on the telephone. So it's not necessarily a waste of time, and LinkedIn works just like that, and Facebook can work just like that. But if you think about it as engaging relationships, then you bring it back to how it can fundamentally help. The second part after engaging relationships is enhancing relationships. And I'll tell you a little bit more from the personal side. For myself and for a lot of people I know, I can't stop hearing about how people have reconnected with old pals from elementary school on Facebook. So they have the relationship engaged. They engaged them 45 years ago. But they haven't enhanced it in the last 20 years because they haven't even talked. Now they find each other, and next thing you know, people are getting together for lunches that haven't seen each other for 25 years.
Right.
The same thing can happen in business. You might have a relationship, but if you're not talking to them on the phone or sending them messages or meeting with them, then you're not maintaining it. Things like LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and the other social media simply provide a way for you to continue to enhance the relationship.
Okay, so this is going to be key, I think. We have a lot of people, of course, in the chat room who are using Twitter, and some conversations going back and forth. I think probably what you just described is developing, enhancing relationships. If something like that, or that sort of mindset, shall we say, is not at the core of what you're doing as a business person, then do you risk sort of getting to the point where you begin to waste your time sort of dribbling away on Twitter and not really having a purpose for your communicating with people there?
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of baking cakes.
Okay.
I have, you can imagine someone who doesn't bake cakes, who decide they want to bake a cake, and they grab a recipe, and they kind of pay attention to it, and they kind of don't. And they put it together, and it kind of looks like an unbaked cake when they put it in the oven. They put it in the oven, and they turn it on, and then they wait for a while, and the cake doesn't rise. Surprise, surprise, right? And then they turn around to you, and they say, yeah, I tried baking a cake, and it didn't work. Cakes don't rise. So that's not the case. I have had, and I'll talk about direct mail for a second, I've had a lot of people say, well, we tried direct mail, and we didn't get anything from it, so direct mail doesn't work. Well, of course it works. You're just not any good at it. And that's because people have to try to understand what can you fundamentally do with any particular tactic. So right now, social media, blogging, and anything online is what people are flocking to it because they're saying, oh, it's new, and everyone says it's interesting. I think I'll turn on Twitter. I'll say that I'm petting my dog, and then business is going to come flooding to me. No, not even close. Even if you start updating your tweets every day, still not even close. You have to spend the time and energy to ask yourself, why is this important to me? Why is it important to my business? And how can I actually then use this over the short and long term to do something?
And now, you mentioned blogging as a part of what you're saying in our last few minutes here. Can you talk a little bit about blogging, and what do you recommend to your professional services clients when it comes to maintaining a branded blog of their own?
Sure. So if you think about online marketing and social media, I heard Paul Dene, who's one of the senior people in marketing at a huge services company, Avaya, he said that a blog is the Swiss Army knife of online marketing and social media, because it is through your blog which you can announce your podcasts. It's through your blog which you can announce your new research and share it. It's through your blog where you can write a column and a commentary on what's going on in your industry. It's through your blog where you can develop your branded personality so people can see who you are and what you're about. And even if they're not following you, if they actually find you and start reading your blog and they're interested in getting to know about you, they can do it through there. So it's the foundation upon which you can do all sorts of other things. Now, my advice for starting and maintaining a blog is pretty simple. Have something to say, and say it much like I was talking about with Cakes Don't Rise. Use it like you mean it. Don't just put some stuff up because, and you can almost feel when people don't want to be blogging, but they have to write a post, so they write something. It's flat, it's got no personality, it's completely unhelpful, it's disjointed, and you can tell the person isn't giving of themselves to their blog. They're just doing it because they're checking something off a list. That's a fast recipe to a dead blog.
Oh, that's really good. Have something to say and use it like you mean it. I think that's true. I see a lot of blogs that you sort of don't have any vitality behind them, I guess. There may be information there, but they're just sort of not very, I guess, captivating.
Yeah, and you can think about that also. I mean, we've all worked at companies, or most of us have worked at companies. And I know people at companies where they retired, but they still show up to work every day.
Right,
they punch in, they punch out, they look like they're going through the motions, but everyone who's actually paying attention knows they're not doing anything. That the energy, that they're not using the force. There's just nothing left in there. And you can find the people that have the energy, vitality, and that are the movers and shakers, and those are the ones that make things happen. You can sense the same thing from a blog or anything about marketing.
That's great, Mike, and I love the analogy of the Swiss Army knife. A blog is the Swiss Army knife of online marketing and social media. Mike, we're going to have to end it there. That was a great way to think about it, though, because I agree with you that a blog is very important. To let everyone know that Mike's book is called Professional Services Marketing, How the Best Firms Build Premier Brands, Thriving Lead Generation Engines, and Cultures of Business Development Success. You can check Mike out on Twitter at twitter.com/Mike_Schultz. And Mike, give us your website address in case we want to connect with you there.
Sure. So I'm going to give you a couple of websites. One is my company, which is the Wellesley Hills Group. That's at whillsgroup.com. The second is Rain Today, which is our free weekly newsletter, which I think has about 70,000 subscribers now, at raintoday.com. And my blog is Services Marketing Blog.
So if I'm a micro business owner and I have 2 or fewer employees, which website should I go to first?
I would go to raintoday.com.
Great. That's a good place to start. I'm sure they all link to each other, right?
Indeed.
Great, Mike. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Indie Business Radio. Really excited to have you sharing some great information about how professional service providers can market their businesses. Next week, I'm excited to tell you on August the 24th, my guest will be Lisa Nichols, the author of No Matter What, 9 Steps to Living the Life You Love. Some of you may have heard of Lisa. She's doing a lot of speaking these days, and she's been showing up at women's conferences all over the place, and I am just delighted to have her on the show next week. So all you have to do next week at 1 o'clock on August 24th is log on to indiebusinessradio.com, turn up your volume, choose the player that you want to listen to the show to, and then come on over here to this link at saberchat.com/indiebusiness, and we will be here to chat live. I'm excited that you guys joined me today. Thanks to my guest, Mike, and, of course, to my listeners, my indies out there. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.